The morning started like any other. Sunlight glinting off the lake, the water calm, and the smell of pine in the air. But that serenity shattered the moment I saw it. Bright orange "for sale" signs planted all along my lakefront property. My jaw dropped. My land, my lake. And there was Karen, the infamous neighborhood tyrant, standing proudly, clipboard in hand like she owned the place. I blinked, thinking I was seeing things. But no, she had somehow convinced herself that my property was up for grabs. And she was moving in fast. Not just a peek at the lake kind of move, oh no. Karen had plans. She wanted to annex my land into her HOA, charge fees, and control who came near my shoreline. And judging by the bulldozers parked behind her, she wasn't kidding. I walked closer, heart racing, and tried to reason with her. Karen, this is my property. You can't! She cut me off mid-sentence with that smug grin only she seems capable of. Oh honey, rules are rules. The HOA has plans, and we're just enforcing them. Enforcing what? My face must have betrayed my disbelief, because she leaned closer, whispering, You'll see. Soon, this will all be part of the neighborhood. It was unreal. My lakefront, my peace, my sanctuary, suddenly being hijacked by someone who thinks they can bulldoze their way into control. I stepped back, taking a deep breath. Panic flirted with anger as I realized just how far Karen was willing to go. She didn't see me as a neighbor. She saw me as an obstacle. That's when the plan hit me. If she wanted to play legal chess and build her little empire, I wasn't going to sit back. I would remind her and the HOA that you can't just march onto someone's land like a general claiming victory. By that afternoon, I had the fencing crew on speed dial. Wooden posts, reinforced steel, locks that could survive a hurricane. Everything that would physically put Karen and her HOA plans on pause. And as I watched the crew unload materials onto my property, I couldn't help but smirk. They were going to learn, the hard way, that my lakefront wasn't just a line on a map, it was my home. And no HOA bully was taking it without a fight. By sunset, the first section of the fence was up. A silent but unmistakable message. Not on my watch. But Karen? Oh, she wasn't backing down. Across the lake, I could see her fuming, plotting, probably already dialing her connections. It was going to get messy, and I had no intention of losing. Next, I needed backup, and that meant calling in the sheriff. Because when someone tries to steal your land, legal consequences aren't optional. They're inevitable. By dawn, I could already hear the faint hum of Karen's SUV creeping along the edge of my property. She wasn't giving up, never does, and judging by the determination radiating from her through binoculars from across the lake, she had a whole strategy in mind. I wasn't about to let her get away with it. This was no longer just a confrontation. It was a full-blown standoff. I called the sheriff's office explaining the situation. Someone is illegally encroaching on my property, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though my hands were still shaking with adrenaline. They're planning to build structures, and I need immediate assistance. The dispatcher assured me an officer would come by to assess the situation, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt a small sense of relief. At least I wasn't alone in this fight. Meanwhile, Karen had recruited reinforcements, or at least, that's what it looked like. A few neighbors, probably persuaded by her charm or fear of HOA retaliation, were following her lead. They brought measuring tapes, clipboards, even survey equipment. Their mission? To legitimize her theft, but all I could see were people walking right onto my land, crossing a line that shouldn't have been crossed in the first place. I walked along the fence, making sure everything was secure. Every lock tight, every post solid. This wasn't just a barrier of wood and steel. It was my statement. The lake behind me gleamed under the early sunlight, calm yet untouchable, much like I intended it to remain. Karen finally approached the fence herself. Her eyes narrowed, trying to figure out a way past the obstacle. You think this fence can stop progress? She called out, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I didn't answer. I let her rage simmer while I recorded everything on my phone, documenting her trespassing and aggressive behavior. Evidence was key. I wasn't just defending property. I was building a case. The sheriff arrived just as Karen began banging on the gate, demanding access. I stepped back, pointing to the clearly posted private property signs, while explaining to the officer everything that had transpired. Karen tried to argue, but the sheriff's gaze didn't waver. This is private property, he said firmly. She's within her rights. Karen's face turned red, her confidence faltering as her plans collided with reality. As the officer spoke with Karen, I realized this was only the beginning. The fence was more than a physical barrier. It was a symbol of my resolve. Karen may have underestimated me, but she had no idea how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. Next, I needed to escalate my defense legally, ensuring Karen couldn't try another stunt. The question was, How far would she push before giving up entirely? And would her HOA allies try to sneak past the sheriff's presence? Karen's glare from across the lake didn't fade, even after the sheriff left. If anything, it only intensified. That's when I realized this wasn't just about stopping her physically anymore. It was about shutting her down legally, permanently. I couldn't rely on fences and sheriff visits alone. I needed papers, official documents, something that would make her think twice before stepping foot on my property again. I spent the morning on the phone with a property lawyer, explaining the situation in detail. Every photo, video, and note from the previous day was cataloged. Every trespass logged. My attorney didn't mince words. You have clear evidence of illegal encroachment. We can file injunctions, and depending on the HOA's involvement, potentially pursue damages for harassment and trespassing. My pulse quickened. Finally, a path forward. Finally, leverage against Karen and her little army. By noon, the first batch of legal notices was drafted. They weren't just warning letters. They were eviction notices for anyone attempting to occupy structures on my property without authorization. I couldn't help but chuckle as I imagined Karen's face when the papers arrived. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had tried to force me off my own land, and now I was turning her and her followers' own tactics against them. I printed, signed, and notarized everything, then personally delivered the notices to every household Karen had rallied. Some neighbors looked stunned, others irritated. Karen, predictably, went ballistic. "You can't do this!" she screamed, waving the documents like they were meaningless pieces of paper. But they weren't. The law was on my side, and the timing was perfect. She had overstepped, and now she had to face the consequences. Her reaction was almost comical from a distance. She stomped, waved her arms, even tried to rally some neighbors to her cause. But my documentation and legal backing made her powerless. Every argument she tried to make was countered with proof of her encroachment, her violations, and her own trespassing. By the time the sun dipped low in the sky, Karen was left standing in disbelief, her confidence shattered. I stood by the fence, watching her retreat to her SUV, muttering under her breath. The lake shimmered in front of me, calm again. A reminder that some things are worth fighting for relentlessly. I had taken control, not just physically but legally, and it felt good. The fight wasn't over. Karen wasn't known for giving up, but I had set the stage. From now on, any attempt to trespass or manipulate the HOA against me would come with real consequences. Tomorrow, I would make sure the HOA couldn't regroup, couldn't claim my land, and couldn't intimidate me. Karen had underestimated my resolve, and she was about to learn that some battles aren't won with words. They're won with strategy, evidence, and relentless determination. The morning sun sparkled over the lake, calm and deceptive, masking the tension that was about to erupt. I knew Karen wasn't done. After her humiliating legal defeat and failed attempts to sneak onto my property, she was plotting one final desperate move. And this time I was ready. The fence stood tall, the locks were secure, and I had the sheriff and legal documentation on my side. There would be no mistakes. Around mid-morning, the familiar rumble of her SUV echoed from the tree line. Karen emerged, clipboard in hand, flanked by a few HOA loyalists who had clearly been roped into her plan. Her face was red, eyes blazing, a mix of rage and disbelief as she saw the fortified fence. She stomped toward the gate, waving her arms. "You can't do this!" she screamed. "This property is being incorporated into the HOA, and you're interfering!" I stepped forward calmly, holding my phone to record everything. "Karen, this is private property. You've been served. Any further trespass will result in arrest." My voice was steady, but inside I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the thrill of finally standing my ground and having the law on my side. She sputtered, trying to argue, gesturing wildly, but the sight of the sheriff approaching silenced her theatrics. The officer arrived, reviewing the papers I had handed over the day before. Karen's defiance crumbled under his stern gaze. "This is private property," he said firmly. "She has every right to secure it." Karen's jaw dropped, her confident facade collapsing. The neighbors who had once supported her began to look uncomfortable, realizing they had been dragged into an illegal scheme. Karen tried one last tactic: intimidation. She pointed, shouted threats, even attempted to get her allies to step over the fence. But with the sheriff present and my documentation airtight, her bluff had no effect. The tension was palpable. Karen pacing, muttering, and realizing that for once, she was powerless. By late afternoon, she finally retreated to her SUV, fuming but defeated. The lake shimmered calmly, reflecting the golden sun, a sharp contrast to the chaos of the morning. I walked along the fence, inspecting every post and lock, making sure my property was truly secure. Peace had returned to my lakefront, This victory wasn't just about land. It was about setting boundaries, asserting control, and standing up to a bully who thought she could manipulate the law. Karen had tried to take everything from me, but I had defended it, strategically, legally, and physically. As I sat by the water, watching the sunset, I realized one thing. Some battles are worth fighting to the very end. And today, justice had been served. My lakefront was mine, my fence was mine, and my peace had been restored. Karen's reign of intimidation was over, and I had emerged stronger, smarter, and victorious. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more epic HOA showdown videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single update. Drop a comment below. I want to know what you would do if someone tried to take your property. And don't forget to like this video if you love seeing justice served the right way.